Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. I really appreciate. The subject of our talk today is the interplay of intellectual property and open innovation and the effect it has on licensing and on markets for intellectual property. So this webinar is given today by OxFirst. For those who do not know OxFirst, which I hope is nobody, but you never know, OxFirst is an economic consultancy specialized on intellectual property and competition law, and take a strong interest in the economic effects of IP, of patents, of copyright, of standard essential patents in particular. And we have a keen interest on understanding how the patent system can or cannot affect dynamics in the market, then competitive dynamics between industry players, but also what type of policy framework and governance context the regulator needs to set in order to make sure we have some sort of at least Pareto optimal condition in markets that allow for competition to grow, for innovation to prosper, for new technologies to come along, and help policymakers around the world really figure out how innovation and prosperity can stem from an adequate reflection on intellectual property law. So OxFirst was started with the vision that innovation should be accessible to all, and that IP at the same time is an incredibly instrumental instrument to achieve innovation, prosperity and growth through the protection of intellectual property rights. With this incredibly specific and grand vision, we launched over a decade ago out of Oxford. Me and a couple of my colleagues, we were still full-time academics in Oxford University. And eventually we had to give back these assignments because there was just too much work to do for the market. And yeah, and we have worked in courts. We have experience in various jurisdictions around the world, in North America, in Europe, on the continent, and in the United Kingdom, obviously, helping parties figure out the value of licensing rates, the value of front rates. We have also helped figure out the value of intellectual property in investment decisions, working side by side with investors to help understand the potential economic return of an investment, not just by simply describing how the patent features, but describing how the patent features are related to potential returns, because after all, what every investor wants is to get a maximum return on their investments while keeping risks as low as possible. And an economic appreciation of the IP can every now and then quite be helpful to come to grips with what could or could not be a good investment. So far that has worked well. We helped companies through initial public offerings, IPOs. We have helped companies attract funding. We have also worked side by side with investors, helping them check if it's a good idea to get involved or not from an economic perspective on the IP. On the policy side, what we have done is we mingled, obviously, post-Brexit with the UK government, helping them understand various issues around IP. We have developed the first national IP strategy of the Republic of Austria. And we have also worked with the European Commission, the European Patent Office, the World Bank, various other international organizations to collaborate with them to help assure some sort of equal level playing field based on an adequate management strategy of IP. So I hope you know now what OxFirst is. OxFirst is a grand vision to make the world a better place by smart IP usage. Now, what has all of that got to do with open innovation? I prepared a few slides this morning after I heard that Professor Granstadt got ill, and I hope you find them somewhat of interest. Let me bring up my PowerPoints. Oh, where are you? How do you do that? More. No, we don't want that live on share screen. Here you go. Share screen. That's the wrong presentation. Nothing is working today. We are all just due for Christmas holidays. 1 second, I'll be with you in a second. Where's my right PowerPoint presentation? Okay, okay. Open innovation. Here's my PowerPoint. No, that's the other one. And here we are. Okay, got it. So share screen. So here we go. So I think companies face, to start from the outset, about the exciting questions about open innovation. Open innovation has obviously become a big buzzword. Henry Chesbrough, Professor Hank Chesbrough at the University of California at Berkeley, Haas School of Business, where I did a postdoc after I left WIPO. I had a fabulous time in sunny California. Came up or was one of the inventors of the term. And I think what I gathered from that was really that open innovation is very much about having courage to promiscuity and being so open to sort of like not invent everything in-house and do everything that you want yourself, and just have your fixed team of people that you always work with in order to come to a conclusion to a question, but to open up and to sort of like say, well, there are some aspects where our company is really good at and we have a core team, but the rest of us, there are other people in the world out there who have great ideas in other areas. And rather than fear the not invented here syndrome, we just accept that we have complete limitations within our company and that we can source in information from others. And we can simply accept that the more diverse the ideas are, the more broadly they are being sent out from all over the world, the more there's gender and cultural and educational and God knows what diversity, the bigger the chances to get a heterogeneous idea of pools of ideas and to grasp them and think about how you can bring these ideas eventually to an attractive product or service line to the market. That's kind of the opposite of what I saw personally in the COVID crisis. I would have thought the smartest and the brightest in the world would team up together in order to bring a great solution as a global response to COVID for all the people in the world. Instead, I saw a lot of COVID nationalism where different countries went solo, not tapping into the global pool of creative minds around the world and the best experts. So I thought this was very unfortunate, given that we know from management theory how to achieve great results, that we did not apply that in an international emergency situations that kept us locked up in our homes for nearly 2 years. It's kind of regrettable that such cutting edge insights are not yet fully applied in practice when we really need it as society. But be it as it is, corporations have been in many instances a good deal quicker than governments to pick up on what to do in order to be good at getting more successful in what they do. And many companies around the world have started to embrace the notion of open innovation. I was recently at the Swiss pharmaceutical company where I recall the last time I went years ago, you couldn't even enter the campus if you were not part of the company. Nowadays, everybody can just walk around in the campus. They're still locked out. Nobody can get into the cafeteria where people would really be working in, but it's a starting point. So if you're recognizing the idea that knowledge is really everywhere and people around the world have marvelous and fabulous ideas, and what a company really needs to achieve is not to have just simply a monolithic in-house team that just pops out the same thoughts it had already 20 years ago, but tap into the diversity of sources of the world. How on earth can you best crack it? And this is why I think I tend to think without the notion of intellectual property, it will be incredibly difficult to come to grips with tapping into the knowledge resources of the world, because without for example, the patent system, it will be incredibly difficult to figure out what you're actually talking about. The big advantage of the patent system is that patents make knowledge explicit. They make clear what one is talking about. They they turn general know-how and thoughts and ideas which are out there into codified ways of thinking about stuff, of thinking about a specific research problem. And that makes it just more clear to trade and to exchange in knowledge. And if we're recognizing, which most economists have meanwhile recognized, that knowledge, innovation, and technology is the driving factor for an economy to grow and to prosper, I find it somehow a more than natural link that this cannot work without IP. On the other hand side, I find myself systematically against the masses of people who talk about technology leading through innovation, what have you, without being systematically linking that to intellectual property. And I'm seeing that this is also happening in the open innovation space. And when I last looked at the literature, which I must admit, it has already been some time ago, the literature is still talking about patents as the big obstacle towards open innovation, rather than as the bridge, the building block towards open innovation. And I think this is where the IP community has some homework to do. We're still being perceived as the troublemakers, the legal and compliance guys who make the life of business miserable because of all of the permissions and God knows what people would need. And because we're still defining patents primarily from a legal perspective, where we're saying, well, it's a negative right, it's a right to exclude third parties. It's nothing more than that. I don't think that's the case. I think the law gives business an opportunity to create new markets, to expand markets for weird, new, and also maybe not weird, new technology, to just around the globe, but not only to invent or innovate on the basis of technological innovation, but also on the basis of business innovation, how we are doing business. And I think where this missing link still needs to add up is by systematically aligning IP and business strategy from an open innovation perspective. I quite frankly believe this is the only way forward for corporations, be they small or large, in order to systematically embrace attractive growth rates for their corporation. So this whole thing around open innovation for me is not a trend to philanthropy or to make the world a better place, which would be super. But I think it's above all an instrument for corporations to grow, increase their competitiveness in the market, and meet shareholders' expectations. I tend to think how we're currently looking at IP business, which looks mainly at IP as an instrument, I don't know, where you see a lot of stick licensing, and a lot of licensing hinged on undertaken under the risk of an injunction. I find this very limited. I believe that the licensing markets could be way more significant if we were to also accept licensing strategies which are systematically associated with an open innovation paradigm, and which accept the big advantage patents bring to the table, that they make knowledge explicit and better understandable. So I do not see this as a trend, as an anti-patent trend or as an anti-current licensing marketing trend. I more see this as an expansion of how else we can play patents. There's nothing, in my opinion, good or bad about patents. The drama is more just like that, how creatively people deal with patents, or how uncreatively to deal with it. So I think this is where we need to just open up our minds. And I met with a few colleagues in Paris is that you need to open up your chakras when you talk about IP. So in that sense, that we still are facing that organizational challenge where patents are the elephant in the boardroom, and where the vast majority of the intellectual assets are not adequately reported on the balance sheet, where they really are the elephant in the boardroom, where people simply do not get the point of why IP matters. and where at best IP enters the boardroom when we are talking about the dilemma, when someone has been sued or when somebody is launching legal proceedings. But this is somehow the tip of the iceberg, and it's not necessarily the best way to get board attention. I think the best way would be to really understand that in the 21st century, at the very latest, but this has started, in my opinion, already with the Industrial Revolution, is that companies are driven by knowledge, by creativity, by new insights. The better we handle our creativity from a business perspective, the better we handle our new perspectives, bringing new perspectives to the world, value proposition, the more successful we will be. And this is why probably IP teams would need to be taking a core function in an organization rather than a peripheral support function, often trying nothing more than protecting the products and following business and leading, like just creating massive cost centers and justifying these costs by saying, well, we have protected our products as good as we can, thinking, well, nobody's going to get any of what we do. Lacking to illustrate how IP relates to overarching corporate performance. All of these things are sort of like not yet standard business practice. And this is where we are really missing out in IP compared to other areas in the business, be it small or large. So this goes for me together with the IP and open innovation paradigm. You cannot do one without the other. So, and really where IP and business strategy, where I think the IP business strategy comes in really is open innovation. You can really see it as a filter, and I've adapted this chart in order to look at it from an IP perspective. So I think it's about other firms' market, licensing to other firms' markets through IP becomes also your market. There's quite a bit of activity around cross-licensing. So increase your market by licensing patents, licensing, spinning out, divesting and selling patents. Surely this is happening. What we're not seeing enough is licensing in, spinning in, investing and buying our patents. After all, it takes an active market, takes both a buyer and a seller. And if everybody just wants to sell and nobody wants to buy, that is not really a good market situation. So, but this is where we are. And this is where many books, such as Kevin Rivette's book on Rembrandts in the Attic, which is meanwhile really old, but still made a splash at the time, where he said, well, we have all of these patent gold nuggets, but we're not working them hard enough. It made a wake-up call because people said, what am I missing out on in my life? I didn't know I had these gold nuggets. The problem was just the book and the analysis lacked a motivation why companies should actually bother and why companies should actually bother in investing and buying our patents. And it's only open innovation, in my opinion, that can offer such a rationale. Without open innovation, we are unable to, there's no motivation. There's a motivation for buying our patents. There's no for selling patents. There's no motivation for buying up patents or for licensing in patents or for spinning in or investing in patents other than the risk of getting an injunction, which is incredibly sad as a value proposition. You know, you don't want to have you want to have a positive rationale, not just like a rationale driven by fear and stress. And open innovation as an instrument can, as a management theory, can provide such a rationale and such a reasoning by simply saying, look, guys, we recognize that knowledge is all over the place. It's scattered. The more diverse the crowd is from which you associate your ideas in, the stronger it gets, and patents are an instrument to achieve that. And if you're starting to think, and your company doesn't need to be the gigantic monolithic closed entity, but can be a small, quick player with lots of net embedded in a huge network of ideas and thoughts. In that context, it becomes natural to think about patents as a motivation to actually license in knowledge and source in knowledge to the best extent possible. And under such a paradigm, we will be able to establish these active markets for intellectual property that we have been aiming for. At least that's been the driving force of my career over the last 20 years. Only when the overarching management strategy changes, then we have a chance to create active markets for IP. Otherwise, we'll be stuck, or we will have active markets for IP which are strongly hinged on litigation, and it will create mainly jobs for people with a background in litigation / licensing. But what I hope we can also create jobs for the IP community is in licensing / business strategy. Licensing / open innovation, licensing / knowledge management, then we're really starting to tap into the diversity of sources and opportunities associated with IP. I don't know, otherwise we'll be stuck with like leveraging 3% or something like that of what IP could offer. Yeah. Maybe it's also important to think about that IP strategy reflects tech cycles. There can be a whole bunch of scenarios which need to be factored in when thinking about IP in the context of open innovation. You can be the total market leader in a technology which nobody needs or uses or is not so popular anymore. Bösendorfer produces one of the best pianos in the world. Unfortunately, the times where young ladies of good status and rank in society spend years of their life studying 5-6 hours the piano each day have passed, to my greatest regret. And we are all doing business and active and fuzzing around in the workplace. So I don't know, times have changed. The amount of people who are active in that area has just declined. So you may be a king in a sector where the demand is just very small. So how could Bösendorfer or other big piano producers reinvent themselves? What type of piano do we need to produce for the 21st century to overcome the fact that people just don't have the time to study the piano half their life? Other question is, what if you have like the key patents in a technology space, but the technology space in analogy to the Bösendorfer situation is starting to become obsolete because a different new technology has started to emerge and is more successful. We are also seeing that on average patents, middle-aged patents are more successful than patents which are younger or in decline, but that we see overarching relationships between tech cycle and patent performance. Obviously, the issue of standardization comes into place because a standard interferes with the natural technology cycles. The act of establishing a standard can mean that better technological solutions are out there, but because industry has so heavily invested in an existing solution and turned it into a standard, the switching costs are just very unpleasantly high, so that there will be quite a reluctance to upgrade to a better, possibly better technology. So standards can also act as conservationists. Yeah, and if you look at the business role of IP, just by looking at the value chain within a corporation and the various functions, I think various forms of IP can have a contribution to different parts of the business, obviously. First question to ask before structuring, for example, a portfolio for out licensing or structuring not from an infringement litigation perspective, that is well known in the market, and I'm not going to add much more to that. But from a corporate strategy perspective, from an open innovation perspective, is how does your IP help you make money, and how do you achieve that? What's the relationship between corporate performance and intellectual property? This is the first question. The second, I think, really important thing is to say, well, every successful company is unique and has a very unique way of doing things. And the patents and other forms of IP can help the company have its unique edge in the market by helping protect this edge better, or by making it more explicit, or by giving it a clearer shape. There's some research which preceded open innovation research around the resource-based view of the firm, which says the internal resources specific to the firm, which make it very unique. These internal resources can be adequately protected through different forms of IP. Hence, the cutting edge of what makes or breaks the company's success can be linked to IP. So how do you generate profits? What are your primary products? What are your spare parts? What are your related products? What's service and maintenance? What important intangibles and tangible assets do you have in the value chain? How does the competitive structure in the industry look like? How does that relate to IP? And I think this exercise to do, starting off with the patents, how patents relate to sales, how patent relates to distribution channels, manufacturing, to the overarching, even the brand value is of importance. And this then means, in my opinion, that an IP department needs to be organized in different terms. It cannot, as I said already in the beginning, be at like the appendix and the under team of another team somewhere doing some fuss with the EPO about fighting oppositions for patent filing, but it needs to take an incredibly central role, because they are kind of like the ones who own the property rights over the knowledge relationships in a company. So they need to be strategically placed in an organigram, and they need to have a different definition of self. And this comes together, I think, with internal marketing around IP and helping understand how the IP really relates to, how the IP really relates to type of technology, type of market served, overarching goals of the company. How is an IP department communicating its goals? Does it understand actually how it's establishing its knowledge base? Does everybody in the company really know there's an IP department, cherish and like it, and automatically submit ideas and suggestions for patent protection? Or is it more like we have no idea what they do, they're somewhere, we are somewhere else? This is some of the important questions to raise. I think also from what indicators do you use then in order to structure your IP portfolio, for example, from an open innovation perspective? You can use as indicators licensing revenues, litigation impact on the company, long-run innovation impact on company, R&D funding, the results of R&D funding, approach to global and not European approaches only. And also, I think from an economic perspective, it's interesting to look at how many alliances can be established on the grounds of IP. I thought approaches where you use IP under an open source paradigm, where you actually use the IP not so much to protect the products, but to establish networks of exchange and networks of allies, can be a very interesting approach. Where companies cross-licensing remains very interesting as an instrument of gaining market share. Interestingly, common market practice more seems to be cross-licensing to assure mutual non-asserts and to assure minimization of litigation risk. But the reality is, what would be very interesting is that these cross-licenses are not only just included to avoid trouble, but that they're actually being used to systematically expand each other's markets. So when you look at what I think are some of the building blocks for an IP strategy, I think it starts off with an economic screening of the IP, so economic patent analysis, which is somewhat different from a mere technical analysis. A rough selection of IP that qualifies, again, narrowing down the selections, identifying IP business partners. Often such business partners can be found through patent landscape analysis, and then engage in IP transactions and close deals. And I think here there are two things. One, the IP can be acting as a way to be the business in and by itself, or as a way to support overarching business goals. And both are legit and both are important. One can be just mere, the IP can be the business, and all of the economic screening, the selection, pricing, the valuation, identifying of business partners, closing deals, that can be just a separate IP company, or which I think, I mean, we have such companies in the market at the moment. However, they're mainly driven by litigation paradigm. I'm not really aware of any IP company that would undertake such activities from a systematically open innovation perspective, but my knowledge may be limited. And obviously the IP can also support the corporation in all of this stuff and all of these goals, because after all, every company wants to sell something, ideally above the price that it costs it to make a living. Business strategy. So how does the IP relate to that business strategy? That's really the homework to do, and the part of the work where there's more attention needed, from a business perspective, not just a legal perspective. And so I would say value-based IP strategy, active licensing programs, looking at licensing from an open innovation perspective, active screening for technology transfer, technology commercialization, leverage IP for open innovation, preemptive publishing can be a great way in the open innovation space as an IP strategy, licensing out, licensing in, IP sales, brokerage. Additional effects of an IP strategy. It offers economic insights on existing IP generation tactics, organizational effects. The importance of the IP department in the firm will likely increase. Competitive effects. It allows to establish new partnerships, enhanced understanding of the market served, better competitive intelligence is also offered. So choose the partner that meets the firm's needs. How do you structure the IP from an economic perspective? How do you select IP candidates? How do you grasp the market? I think very important here is not only an understanding of self, of what IP you own, how IP relates to your business, but also what others own, or how it relates to the business of others. Where there can be IP opportunities that others have. I think this is really important, and I've made the experience that economic patent landscapes can be of great help and support in that context. So yeah, getting in touch, involving market IP to third parties. I think once we are able to refine or to broaden our association of what licensing means and how to leverage IP more systematically from business activities, from a business activity perspective, I believe then we have a chance to create also secondary markets for intellectual property. I have been involved in early efforts to create secondary markets for IP. I assume it was too early. It was recapped basically under without litigation, people don't take a license. Well, I kind of thought we need to change the mindset a bit here. We need to give people more, we need more business people probably in IP, not just litigators. Yeah, the people with different backgrounds grasp IP differently, but IP trading platforms, IP market makers, bulk trading, over-the-counter trading of IP, active markets. I think all of this will become possible once IP is more systematically accepted as a business instrument. Yeah, this is, so to recap, I think on the interplay of IP and open innovation, my key points are, first of all, IP and open innovation are not paradoxical. It is not an either-or choice. I think IP can serve as a core instrument of open innovation, and it can allow companies to actually leverage more systematically the knowledge resources that are out there. And it can allow companies to help understand who actually would be a good knowledge partner, for example, by undertaking an economic patent landscape analysis. I also think that the second point that should be made is that looking at IP and an open innovation strategy implies different approaches to licensing. And it also opens up, as a third point, a new position of the IP team in the organizational structure of a company, be it small or big. And I tend to think that all of this taken together, and that is my fourth point, will eventually lead us to secondary markets to IP and to an active trading volume in IP. To the contrary, if we are just remaining with our intellectual property strategies where we currently are, where we mainly look at IP as a defense, as a negative right, the right to exclude third parties, which is the perfectly correct legal definition, we may be just limiting ourselves of business opportunities. And this does not mean that we are limiting ourselves in terms of philanthropic goals or making the world a better place, but we are literally limiting ourselves of the ability to be more successful in business. Voila, this is my short recap of IP and open innovation. I worked with Henry Jesper. I published with him a book with Oxford University Press, where we did the chapter on IP and open innovation. I'll be happy to send that chapter out if you're interested in that. Yeah, I'd be very interested to hear from you in an open innovation idea, what your experiences are in this area and what you think of what I said. Thank you very much. Any comments, ideas, suggestions, thoughts? Anything? Okay. If there are no questions, that is fine too. Again, I'm really sorry our speaker dropped out at the very last minute this morning. I will send you my chapter on IP and open innovation as a follow-up. Read it over Christmas. If you have any question, this is all about OxFirst is trying its best to be an open platform for thoughts and ideas. We're trying to crowdsource and crowd exchange thoughts on IP. Please get in touch. I hope you enjoyed this webinar and had a good time and took away maybe the one or the other thought. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.